Hello and welcome to our morning edition of Arirang News. We begin with these stories making the headlines at this hour. South Korean and U.S. officials met in Washington and agreed to establish task forces to carry out the agreements reached during the recent summit between Presidents Lee Jae-myung and Donald Trump on issues including the production of nuclear power submarines. Meanwhile, Washington also confirmed that tariffs on Korean auto exports to the United States have been lowered to 15%. Following the massive data breach at South Korea's retail giant Coupang, which affected more than 33 million customer accounts, police say the suspect is now being tracked using the suspect's IP address. Meanwhile, public frustration is now turning into legal action, with some users already filing lawsuits through local law firms. South Korea's new multi-purpose satellite, Arirang 7, successfully made initial contact with a ground station after lifting off from South America on Monday. The satellite will be used to provide high-quality imagery to monitor the environment, natural disasters, and analyze urban heat islands. We begin this morning in the United States, where the Commerce Secretary confirmed that South Korea's auto exports to the U.S. will now be subject to a reduced 15% tariff. The announcement comes as Seoul's first vice minister is in Washington to start implementing what was discussed during the summit between President Lee Jae-myung and U.S. President Donald Trump last month. Our Kim Do-yeon reports.
South Korean automobiles exported to the United States will now be subject to a 15% tariff, down from the 25% tariff implemented in April. U.S. Commerce Secretary Howard Lutnick announced through social media on Monday that import duties have been reduced to 15% retroactively to November 1st. Lutnick stated the move matches reciprocal tariffs imposed on Japan and the European Union and follows Seoul's recent legislative steps to fulfill investment pledges made to the U.S. A bill for special investment in the U.S. has been proposed at the National Assembly to carry out the $350 billion worth of investment by South Korea agreed during recent trade negotiations. This economic development comes as diplomats from both sides met in Washington to accelerate the implementation of a joint fact sheet that lays out a broad package of trade, investment, and security agreements reached between President Lee Jae-myung and President Donald Trump last month. First Vice Foreign Minister Park Yun-ju met with U.S. Deputy Secretary of State Christopher Landau on Monday to work on carrying out those agreements.
We confirmed a shared consensus with the U.S. side to implement the joint fact sheet swiftly and actively.
To achieve this, both sides agreed to establish task forces to drive simultaneous progress across key industries.
We agreed to match specific agencies for each issue to ensure the right counterparts are communicating effectively to move things forward.
A key agenda item was the production of nuclear power submarines, which the U.S. gave the green light to following the Trump summit in Gyeongju. During the meeting, Vice Minister Park urged his U.S. counterpart to swiftly begin discussions on civil uranium enrichment and spent nuclear fuel reprocessing by South Korea. Deputy Secretary Landau welcomed South Korea's unprecedented investment commitments. Addressing the recent detention of Korean workers in Georgia, officials noted substantive progress in preventing a recurrence, including the opening of a dedicated visa consultation desk for Korean enterprises. Vice Minister Park is scheduled to meet with White House NSC officials later this week to further discuss the implementation of these measures. Kim Do-yeon, Arirang News.
Meanwhile, a thorough investigation is now underway into the massive data breach at South Korean retail giant Coupang. Police say they have now secured the IP address used by the suspect after Coupang identified a former employee, a Chinese national, who has already left South Korea as the person responsible for the incident. Our Lee Seung-jae has more.
Police in Seoul are stepping up their investigation into the massive data breach at e-commerce giant Coupang, saying they have now secured the internet protocol address used by the suspect and are tracing their movements. Authorities say the breach began in June and ultimately exposed the personal information of nearly 34 million customers. The leaked data includes names, email accounts, mailing addresses, and phone numbers. Coupang revealed the scale of the breach on Saturday, identifying a former employee, a Chinese national who has already left South Korea, as the person responsible. An official with the Seoul Metropolitan Police told reporters on Monday that investigators are analyzing server logs submitted by Coupang. They confirmed that the IP address used in the intrusion has been secured and that officers are now working to locate the suspect. Police are also examining the individual's nationality, whether they departed South Korea after resigning from the company, and whether they are the same person who contacted Coupang by email and threatened to publicly reveal the stolen data. For now, police say there are no confirmed reports of voice or SMS phishing directly tied to the breach. However, authorities are coordinating with related ministries to prepare for possible follow-up crimes, given the scale of the leaked information. At the center of the investigation is a critical piece of internal infrastructure. Logging into Coupang's internal systems requires a token that serves as a digital access card. That token must be validated by an access token signing key, a kind of secret seal that ensures the token is legitimate and not forged. Experts believe the former employee may have exploited a vulnerability in which the signing key was not updated or revoked even after the employee left the company. Coupang has rejected claims that the signing key was left unattended for as long as 5 to 10 years. But the company declined to offer further details, citing the ongoing investigation. Meanwhile, public frustration is turning into legal action. As allegations grow about Coupang's lax management of its authentication system and its role in enabling one of the worst data breaches in the country, class action lawsuits are gaining momentum. Some users have already filed suits through local law firms, setting the stage for what could become a prolonged legal and regulatory battle for the e-commerce giant. 이승재, Arirang News.
In other news, South Korea's new multi-purpose satellite Arirang 7 has successfully made initial contact with a ground station after its launch from South America. The Korea Aerospace Administration says the satellite separated from the Vega C rocket, which lifted off at 2:21 a.m. Korea Standard Time from the Guyana Space Center in Kourou. It established first communication just over an hour later with the Troll Base Station in Antarctica. Officials confirmed that Arirang 7's solar panels deployed correctly and that all systems appear stable. They also said more detailed launch data will be released later on Tuesday, adding that 4 additional communication passes are needed before the mission is declared a success. The Korean government has been working to stabilize the foreign exchange market after the Korean won fell to its weakest point in months, with $1 nearing 1,500 Korean won. For more on this, we're joined today by Professor Shin Se-dun, professor at the Division of Business Economics at Sookmyung Women's University. Professor Shin, thanks for joining us this morning.
Good morning.
So to address the volatility in the foreign exchange market, the government is now considering extending the foreign exchange swap agreement, between the central bank and the National Pension Service. Do you think this could help stabilize the weakening Korean won?
Definitely. Korean general public does not understand what is NPS and how big is the foreign assets held by NPS. NPS is, in Korean we call 국민연금. It has one of the biggest amount of foreign assets in the world. I think by now, net assets of foreign assets held by NPS is about $350 billion. $350 billion. And if you assume the 10% return, which was a little higher than 10% the year 2025, the amount of the profits in 1 year is about to $35 billion. So that $35 billion, if you divide it by 12 months, that's going to be about 4 billion, 3 billion, something like that. And if you calculate the amount of foreign investment in Korea, that's about $10 billion a month. And calculating the inflow of foreign capital from outside, that's about $5 billion. So every month we need about $5 billion in shortage in transactions. And if you practice the swap agreement between NPS and Bank of Korea, which is about $4 billion a month, I think that's more than enough. So I think people have to understand that Korean government and the Bank of Korea and the National Pension System Service has enough foreign reserves to protect whatever, fluctuation in exchange rate. The problem is, most public does not understand the magnitude of potential foreign reserve holdings by NPS. I think that is one of the crucial problems.
I see. So I guess the government is fully prepared. The Bank of Korea says the weakening Korean won is partly due to the increased investment in U.S. stocks by investors, and the government's now considering a tax hike in response. What's your take on this?
Well, the movement of Korean currency, which has been very weak, for the last, I think, a couple of weeks, is because of complicated reasons. There's an increased demand for dollar. One of the reasons is, NG's, foreign investment, which expects an outflow of capital. But there's another reason that there's a reduction in supply of dollar. In other words, inflows of capital has been increasing recently. To me, the most important reason is that the yen has been very weak, for the couple of months. It reached 157 one time last week. So when yen gets very weak, there's a tendency that Korean currency also gets weak. So one of the crucial reasons that Korean won has been pretty weak is because of the yen. So if the yen gets stronger, I think the Korean currency will also be stabilized in the future. And to the issue of tax, I think it is pretty what to say? I think it's careless. I think the government officials are taking too lightly about taxing any kind of income. I think it is premature at this time to think about taxing, investment income from outside. I think it is premature decision on the part of the government, and I think it is very imprudent mention on the part of the government official.
I see. So a lot of things to consider before proposing the tax hike. And the International Monetary Fund, IMF, says South Korea's GDP in U.S. dollar terms, used for global comparisons, appears to have shrunk, while even though nominal GDP in Korean won is projected to grow by around 2% this year. What's your take on this? And do you expect the weakening Korean won to have a greater impact on the economy next year?
Well, I think you have to consider the case of Japan. In Korea, many international statistics are represented by dollar terms. We have to calculate, Korean currency value into American dollar using exchange rate. But in the case of Japan, they are sticking to yen. No matter what is the exchange rate, the Japanese government always represents their economic statistics in local currency, which is the yen. So to me, the fluctuations in GDP in terms of dollar, it doesn't really matter, because for most Korean, we don't have the opportunity to change or to be exposed to international transactions. So even though dollar term GDP has been in the negative region, I think it doesn't make many sense. So we shouldn't care pretty much about negative decrease in dollar value of GDP. In terms of trade, usually if the Korean currency gets weaker, it's going to give a little bit of a boost in the competitiveness. The problem is, Japanese yen has been depreciated faster than Korea, which means that Japanese products become much more competitive against most of the country, including Korea. So I'm expecting that there's going to be very little, beneficial effect on trades because of the Japanese yen. Otherwise, it has a negative effect that, we have to import a lot of raw material from the outside, and the cost of import of raw material from outside has to increase because of the weaker currency. That, I think, is going to induce inflation, and that I think is going to have a negative effect. So in all, I should say that high, increase in the Korean currency is going to have a, negative effect on Korean economy.
I see. I guess we'll have to see how the economic situation turns out next year. All right, Professor Shim, I'm afraid that's all the time we have for today. Thank you so much for your insight this morning. We appreciate it.
My pleasure.
This coming Wednesday marks 1 year since the imposition of martial law by former President Yoon Suk-yeol. Now, marking the anniversary, President Lee Jae-myung is scheduled to address the nation, stressing the efforts by the people and the restoration of democracy. Our top office correspondent Yoon Jung-min reports.
President Lee Jae-myung will deliver a special statement on December 3rd, the first anniversary of the martial law declaration by his predecessor.
The statement will be about remembering the efforts by the people who have turned extreme chaos into peace.
A press conference is also scheduled on Wednesday with dozens of foreign journalists, as the secretary added that the anniversary will be remembered in a calm manner, but meaningful.
It will be held under the title of A Renewed Democracy, 1 year on. The president will declare the restoration of K-democracy to the international community and deliver a message of national unity.
Later in the day, Lee will have a luncheon with the 5 key figures, including South Korea's Supreme Court Chief Justice. Ahead of the anniversary, the president took to social media on Monday, saying if you neglect acts of insurrection that are lurking on every corner, it'll surely recur someday, as he posted a related article. It's widely seen as him revisiting his will to make sure any remnants related to the short-lived military ruling would not go unpunished. On December 3rd, 2024, former President Yoon Suk-yeol declared martial law, citing a fight against anti-state forces, which was lifted 6 hours later after it was voted down by the National Assembly. It has resulted in him being removed from the office, who's now facing insurrection charges. Yoon Jung-min, Arirang News.
Meanwhile, the main opposition People Power Party lawmaker, Chu Kyung-ho, is appearing in court today for a substantive review of his arrest warrant, amid allegations that he worked with former President Yoon Suk-yeol during the martial law declaration. Lawmakers last week voted to consent to the arrest after the special prosecutors alleged Chu, who was then the floor leader for PPP, colluded with Yoon on the night martial law was declared to prevent lawmakers from voting against the order. Chu's defense denies the charges, arguing he actually attempted to get lawmakers together for a vote, but was hindered by military blockades. A decision on his arrest is expected either Tuesday night or by Wednesday morning, December 3rd, which is the first anniversary of the martial law declaration.
Good morning, I'm Chu Ji-hyun, and this is The World Now. In Europe, Ukraine's President Volodymyr Zelenskyy has made it clear that territory is the biggest obstacle to any peace deal with Russia. He said Ukraine will not surrender land in Donbas, even as Russia keeps demanding it. His comments came in Paris on Monday after talks on ending the war with France's President Emmanuel Macron and leaders from the UK, Germany, Poland, and Italy. At the same time, in Florida, Ukrainian and U.S. officials completed 2 days of negotiations to rewrite an early peace plan that Kyiv believed was tilted towards Moscow. The White House said it is very optimistic that progress can be made. U.S. Special Envoy Steve Witkoff will meet President Vladimir Putin in Russia on Tuesday, alongside Trump's son-in-law and advisor Jared Kushner, to deliver the results of the Florida talks. Zelenskyy said the discussions were constructive, but warned that territory remains the toughest issue to resolve. In Ukraine, a Russian missile strike on the city of Dnipro killed 4 people and wounded 40, according to Ukrainian officials on Monday. The acting regional governor said 11 of the injured are in serious condition and that search and rescue operations have been completed. Emergency services reported damage to office buildings, businesses, and 49 cars. Images posted online showed firefighters and crews evacuating people on stretchers. Dnipro and its surrounding region has faced frequent Russian missile and drone attacks since 2022. Russia has not commented on the strike. In the United States, the White House released a memo on Monday confirming that President Donald Trump underwent MRI scans of his heart and abdomen in October as part of what his doctor called a preventive executive-level physical. Trump's physician Sean Barbabella said the cardiovascular and abdominal imaging was perfectly normal, adding that the scans are meant for men in Trump's age group to detect issues early. The memo was released after Trump told reporters on Sunday that the MRI results were, quote, perfect. The White House said the scans were part of his routine physical at Walter Reed, though doctors note these types of MRIs are not standard in typical medical screenings. Oxford University Press named rage bait as its word of the year on Monday after the term's usage shot up threefold in the last 12 months. It's defined as content engineered to make you angry just long enough to boost clicks, a sign Oxford says that people now recognize how easily online emotions get steered. The phrase first appeared in 2002 before evolving into today's go-to label for outrage-driven posts.
Winter really kicks into gear starting today, and cold air sliding down from the north will pull down our overnight temperatures even further. Tomorrow morning's high drops to -8 degrees and daytime highs stay below freezing all day at -1 degree. So that means a big freeze tomorrow. And Thursday morning, we are waking up to another very cold morning at -8 degrees, so make sure to dress extra warmly. Then we have snow in the forecast. 충청남도, 전라북도 provinces and Jeju will see rain or snow continuing into Thursday. The western coastal areas could see up to 8 centimeters of somewhat heavy snowfall. And this afternoon, Seoul will be getting up to just 3 degrees Celsius. Daegu, Gyeongju topping out at 10 degrees. And of course, the wind chill will make it feel colder in many parts under sunny skies nationwide. Meanwhile, along the East Coast, the air is extremely dry, so the risk of fire remains high. So for the remainder of the week, brace for big temperature swings and pockets of heavy snow. Please stay warm and safe.
That's all we have for this morning. Arirang News will be back at noon Korea time. Thanks for watching.